Have you ever watched someone rise from the streets to the very top of the entertainment world, only to hear people ask one question years later? Have they changed? That question has followed some of the biggest names in music and comedy, but recently it has landed squarely on one of hip-hop's most recognizable icons, Snoop Dogg. For decades, Snoop has represented survival. He turned a difficult beginning into a legendary career, became a global superstar, built successful businesses, appeared in movies and television, and somehow stayed relevant through multiple generations. To millions of fans, that's the definition of success. But to others, success can come with difficult questions. Is staying on top the same as staying true to where you came from? Can someone evolve without losing the values that made people believe in them in the first place? Those questions have become even louder after comedian Katt Williams publicly criticized the direction he believes Snoop has taken. Known for speaking his mind without worrying about public reaction, Katt has built a reputation as someone willing to challenge powerful people in entertainment. Whether people agree with him or not, his comments almost always spark intense conversations because he rarely chooses safe topics. This time, his attention turned towards Snoop Dogg. Instead of celebrating Snoop's business success or his ability to remain one of hip-hop's biggest cultural figures, Katt questioned something much deeper. He suggested that the legendary rapper may have become too comfortable with the very systems he once appeared to challenge. In Katt's view, there is a difference between building an empire and becoming part of the establishment. That idea immediately divided fans. Some argued that Snoop deserves credit for adapting to an industry that constantly changes. They believe longevity requires flexibility, smart business decisions, and the willingness to enter spaces that once seemed impossible. Others wondered whether Katt's criticism reflected a broader concern shared by people who feel that fame sometimes changes the people they once admired. What makes this debate fascinating isn't simply that two well-known entertainers disagree. It's what they represent. On one side stands Snoop Dogg, a symbol of reinvention. Few artists have transformed themselves as many times while maintaining mainstream popularity. From his early years defining West Coast hip-hop to becoming a television personality, entrepreneur, actor, and household name, Snoop has consistently found new ways to remain relevant. On the other side stands Katt Williams, whose public image has long been tied to challenging authority. Throughout his career, he has often positioned himself as someone unwilling to compromise his opinions, even if doing so costs him opportunities. Supporters admire that willingness to speak openly. Critics argue that his comments often create unnecessary controversy. Yet regardless of which side people choose, one thing remains true. When Katt speaks, people pay attention. The latest discussions surrounding Snoop didn't appear overnight. It emerged from years of observing how his public image has evolved. There was a time when Snoop represented the rebellious energy of West Coast rap. His music reflected the struggles, ambitions, and realities of the communities that shaped him. His confidence, storytelling, and unmistakable style helped define an entire era of hip-hop. Those early years established him as more than a rapper. He became a cultural symbol. As the years passed, however, Snoop expanded far beyond music. He entered television. He partnered with major companies. He launched businesses. He collaborated with celebrities from completely different backgrounds. He built relationships across entertainment, sports, and corporate America. To many observers, these moves reflected growth. To others, they represented distance from the image that first made him famous. That's where the conversation becomes complicated. Is growth supposed to look the same throughout an entire lifetime? Can someone who once challenged the system eventually work within it without betraying who they are? Or does every successful partnership slowly reshape public perception until fans begin questioning whether the original spirit still exists? Those questions don't have simple answers. Katt Williams believes they deserve to be asked. Supporters of his argument point out that entertainers often face pressure once they become financially successful. They no longer answer only to fans. Business partners, advertisers, television networks, investors, and corporate relationships all become part of the equation. Every public appearance, interview, endorsement, and performance carries consequences that extend far beyond music or comedy. Critics of Katt's comments respond differently. They argue that surviving in entertainment for decades requires intelligence, adaptability, and strategic thinking. Remaining relevant isn't easy. Many talented artists disappear after only a few successful years. Snoop has managed to stay visible across multiple generations, introducing himself to entirely new audiences without abandoning his original fan base. That achievement alone, they say, deserves respect. Perhaps the most interesting part of this entire discussion is that neither perspective completely cancels the other out. Success often requires change. Authenticity often demands consistency. Balancing those two realities may be one of the hardest challenges any public figure ever faces. As this conversation spreads across social media, interviews, podcasts, and comment sections, people aren't simply debating Snoop Dogg or Katt Williams. They're debating a much larger idea. At what point does evolution become transformation? And when does transformation become something people no longer recognize? Those questions have no universal answer, but they continue to fuel one of the most talked about conversations surrounding two influential figures whose careers have taken very different paths. Because sometimes the loudest debate isn't about who is right. It's about what success really costs. Long before the headlines, before the business deals, before television appearances made him a familiar face far beyond the hip-hop community, Snoop Dogg's story was built on struggle. His rise wasn't polished, and it certainly wasn't predictable. He emerged during a period when West Coast rap was changing the music industry forever, carrying with him an unmistakable voice and a style that instantly separated him from everyone else. For millions of listeners, Snoop wasn't simply another rapper trying to make hit records. He represented a generation that felt overlooked. His music painted pictures of real neighborhoods, difficult choices, and the pursuit of a better future. Fans didn't just hear his lyrics. They believed they were hearing someone who genuinely understood the life he described. That authenticity became the foundation of his career. As years passed, however, something remarkable happened. Instead of fading away like countless artists before him, Snoop continued finding new opportunities. While many musicians struggled to stay relevant after a decade, he kept reinventing himself. One year he was releasing albums. The next, he was appearing in films. Soon afterward, he became a television personality, launched businesses, partnered with global brands, and reached audiences who had never even listened to his early records. From a business perspective, it was almost impossible not to admire. Very few entertainers have managed to remain part of popular culture for as long as Snoop has. His image became recognizable to people of every generation. Parents who grew up listening to his music eventually watched him appear in family-friendly commercials alongside their children. That kind of crossover success is incredibly rare. But success often changes public expectations. When someone begins as the voice of outsiders, fans naturally pay close attention to every decision they make after reaching the top. Every partnership becomes symbolic. Every appearance is analyzed. Every statement carries more weight than before. That's exactly where the conversation surrounding Snoop began shifting. Some longtime supporters noticed that his public image looked very different from the rebellious artist they remembered. Instead of appearing primarily in music discussions, he increasingly appeared in mainstream entertainment, advertising campaigns, celebrity collaborations, and corporate partnerships. For many observers, this wasn't a problem. They viewed it as evidence that Snoop had accomplished something extraordinary. Rather than remaining confined to one audience, he expanded into multiple industries without completely disappearing from music. He proved that a rapper could become far more than a recording artist. Others weren't convinced. To them, every new business venture raised another question. Was Snoop expanding his influence? Or slowly replacing the identity that first earned people's respect? This is where Katt Williams entered the conversation. Unlike many public figures who carefully choose their words, Katt has developed a reputation for saying exactly what he believes, regardless of the consequences. Throughout his career, he has repeatedly argued that the entertainment industry rewards people who become easier to control, while creating obstacles for those who refuse to follow expectations. Whether people agree with him or not, that belief shapes nearly everything he says publicly. So when he looked at Snoop's career, he didn't simply see an artist making smart business moves. He saw someone whose relationship with power appeared different from the one fans remembered years earlier. That distinction became central to his criticism. Katt wasn't questioning whether Snoop had become successful. No one could seriously argue against that. Instead, he questioned what happens when enormous success places someone inside institutions they once criticized. Can they continue representing ordinary people while building relationships with powerful organizations? Is it possible to maintain the same perspective after spending years surrounded by influence, wealth, and opportunity? Those questions resonate because they extend far beyond music. History is filled with athletes, actors, musicians, comedians, and activists whose supporters eventually asked similar questions. Once someone reaches the highest levels of fame, people naturally wonder whether their priorities remain the same. Some insist that maturity changes everyone. Others argue that true principles shouldn't depend on status. Neither side finds it easy to convince the other. What makes Snoop's situation especially unique is that his transformation happened gradually rather than suddenly. There wasn't one single moment when public perception completely shifted. Instead, small moments accumulated over many years. One appearance led to another. One partnership became several. One interview sparked another discussion. Eventually, people who had followed his career for decades realized they were looking at someone whose public identity had expanded far beyond music. For newer fans, this wasn't surprising. Many younger audiences first encountered Snoop through television, advertisements, sports broadcasts, comedy shows, or business ventures before ever hearing his earliest albums. To them, Snoop wasn't simply a rapper. He was an entertainer capable of fitting into almost any environment. Older fans often remembered something different. They remembered the artist whose confidence came from challenging expectations rather than comfortably fitting into them. Neither memory is necessarily wrong. They simply reflect different chapters of the same career. That difference in perspective explains why public reaction remains so divided today. Some believe Snoop's evolution demonstrates intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. Others worry that adapting too successfully sometimes creates distance between celebrities and the communities that originally embraced them. Katt Williams clearly falls into the second category. His broader message isn't only about Snoop Dogg. It's about what fame can do to anyone. According to Katt's worldview, the entertainment industry constantly tests people. Sometimes those tests involve money. Sometimes they involve influence. Sometimes they involve acceptance from powerful circles that once seemed impossible to enter. The challenge, in his opinion, isn't becoming successful. The challenge is remembering who you were before success arrived. Supporters of Katt's comments argue that this is precisely why his words attract attention. They believe he raises uncomfortable questions many people hesitate to ask publicly. His critics respond that judging another person's journey from the outside ignores the realities of maintaining a career for decades. After all, surviving in entertainment isn't simple. Industries change. Audiences change. Technology changes. Cultural expectations change. Artists either adapt or risk disappearing. Perhaps that's why this debate refuses to fade away. It isn't merely about whether Snoop changed. Almost everyone changes over time. The deeper question is whether those changes represent growth or something entirely different. And depending on who you ask, the answer couldn't be more different.